that we would be back, but we are. I'm just kidding. He knew we were going back.
You were right. We are better.
we are much better sounding, I think.
Yes.
Although I'm still a little bit stuffed up.
I've never had an illness linger this long before.
Me neither.
But it's like mono, it lingered, just like being fatigued. But this is like, I'm still sneezing.
Yeah, me too. I sneeze like crazy. Like I sneeze like 40 times a day.
And then sometimes you don't sneeze when you need to sneeze.
Yeah.
And that's almost as bad as sneezing so much.
And then sometimes you sneeze like 4 times in a row and you're like, am I okay?
Oh gosh, I don't do that. I die.
Oh man, maybe I'm not okay.
This isn't a podcast about lingering COVID symptoms, though. This is a podcast about ghosts and history, and this is Haunted or Hoax.
Yes, I'm Kristen.
And I'm Jennifer.
And here we are. And
welcome.
What are we covering today? We're going to be covering a house in Kansas.
Yeah. It is the Sallie house in Atchison.
And I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell me about
like
the spooky stuff.
I don't know why that was a question.
You don't have to if you don't want to. I can go first if you want me to.
I'll go first. I'm always like, yeah, are you sure? Like, I just want to give you the opportunity in case you want to go first one time. So, but I think that for this one, it makes sense for me to go first. And then.
Yeah, I think you need to tell me all the spooky stuff so that I can tell you all of the drama that happened afterwards.
Perfect. Well, okay. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Alexis H on Facebook because she is actually the one that suggested Sallie House to us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We really love getting suggestions. So if you have one, remember to comment on Facebook or, email us, DM us on social media because it helps us out a lot for ideas. And the Sallie House, like we said, is in Atchison, Texas, which is actually 6 hours from Liberal, Texas. Texas. Let's start over.
You just gave me the biggest heart attack. So I was like, oh my God, I did the wrong house.
No, I don't know why I have Texas on the brain. Atchison, Kansas, which is 6 hours from Liberal, Kansas, which claims to be Dorothy's place of origin in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, they claim that because they have a replica of the house and the farm. So that's a fun fact.
Is there a witch underneath it?
I don't know. From the pictures, it didn't look like there was one, but I think it's like, that's where she was ripped from. So the tornado blew her into Oz.
Did you also see that Amelia Earhart was from Atchison as well? She considered it her hometown.
I did not, but those are 2 fun facts.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. But our house, the Sallie house, originally, allegedly, from the rumors and legends, was the residence of an Atchison physician named Charles Finney, according to legend. It was on the bottom front floor, it was office space and examination rooms. And then the doctor and his family supposedly lived upstairs. The story goes that one day a frantic mother arrived carrying her 6-year-old daughter, Sallie. The child had collapsed from abdominal pain, and the doctor diagnosed her with appendicitis and rushed her into surgery. Believing that the appendix was going to burst and cause a lot more internal injury and problems to Sallie, he started cutting before the anesthesia took effect. And I guess this was too much for Sallie's little body. Her screams suddenly stopped, and she grew pale and limp and died on the operating table. Supposedly, they say her last memories of a man who she thought was torturing her, but was actually trying to help her. And that's sort of the base legend of Sallie House. That's where Sallie's spirit supposedly comes from, is that incident. Now, there was a story that I read that was an account of somebody on onlyinyourstate.com. It was I believe a person who's come from Atchison, Atchison, Kansas. I don't know why I keep saying that. Atchison,
is there an
Kansas.
Atchison, Texas for real?
I don't know. Well, if you live in Atchison, Texas, let me know. But
because clearly Kristen needs to communicate with you.
I need to go there. My soul is calling. But somebody who lives supposedly in Kansas told a version of the story that is a little bit more sordid, I guess. Onlyinyourstate.com reported that the doctor actually had an affair with an African American housemaid, resulting in the birth of Sallie. When she was around 6 or 7, she became ill, and it was determined that she needed to have her appendix taken out, but the doctor didn't want anybody to know about Sallie, so he refused to take her to the hospital, and she died. This resulted in her mother becoming very angry and attacking the doctor, which resulted in somehow her death. They don't say how. And then the doctor supposedly moved away, and Sallie and her mother remained as spirits in the house. The mother is still grieving her child and is the one that attacks visitors, and Sallie is the happy child ghost that tries to play with children. It also said in the story that this person suspected the doctor buried the bodies of Sallie and her mother somewhere on the premises or in the basement. This is the only place I saw this story, and it was somebody's just retelling of the story. So I don't know if maybe that's just some sort of local rumor to make the story more juicy, or if that's actually got any merit to it, but that is a version that is also floating around on the internet. Now, it said that there have always been these sorts of hauntings of Sallie, at least happening since the late 1800s. Andrea Clements with the Atchison Chamber of Commerce actually was quoted saying she always has a headache in the house and a scratchy feeling at the back of her throat.
Ooh, that's allergies. Allegra will clean that right up.
That's mold. Sorry. A headache when you're in the house and a scratchy feeling in the back of the throat. I've lived in an 1800s mattress factory and I got the same thing, and it was mold. So
I will say though, didn't we recently hear that a headache in a house is a sign of a demon?
That's true. Yeah, that was a
Hinsdale house?
Hinsdale house. Yep, because Nick and Katrina went there and he was very concerned. I remember this now.
Anyway, we have heard in the past that
headaches are part of an evil entity. So who knows? It could be mold, it could be allergies, it could be demons. All sound pretty yucky to me. But all the reports for a really long time seemed rather harmless. And then Tony and Deborah Pickman moved in with their baby in 1993. And this is where the legend kind of branches off into like a kind of Amityville horror-like family haunting, if you will. They are a big part of, I think, why this house got so much notoriety. I think that people knew about Sallie and the haunting before, but from my research of the paranormal and everything going on with the legends, they are kind of like in the smack dab middle of it. So a lot of the information comes from them. They were in the Ghost Adventures episode that I watched, which I'll get to into some of their experiences later. I am gonna try out a new thing because I think that it gets maybe a little boring for you guys if I just straight up recap some episodes. So I'm going to try to just sprinkle the big juicy bits in with the rest of my research, and you can tell me how you like it. If you liked it the old way or if you like it this new way, you can let me know. And Jennifer, you can let me know too.
I will.
But they interviewed Tony, who said he first saw Sallie after coming home, and he stated that she was an adorable little girl, and he ended up drawing a picture of the little girl he claims to have seen, and honestly, it is a cute little drawing of a girl. You saw that drawing, right?
Yeah, it looks like a doll.
Yeah. I wouldn't be afraid of that if I saw it in my house, I don't think. But she doesn't look 6. Now, that's the key part, is like Sallie supposedly is 6 years old, and the drawing is more like a toddler, in my opinion. So is it really Sallie? Regardless, I think that the couple, when they first moved in, were under the impression that it was just a little girl that was haunting their house. And that can be a little bit off-putting, but it could be just a child stuck and you feel bad for it. Deborah did say her mothering instincts came out when she learned that there was a possible child spirit in her home. According to Pickmans, their dogs started growling at seemingly nothing, especially in the nursery. Some of their other things that have happened in their home are fires that broke out Seemingly out of nowhere and from nothing, a spirit that seemed to attach itself to Tony, who experienced physical and emotional attacks from scratches and mood changes, very reminiscent of Amityville.
Right.
And another thing that they have in common with Amityville is Deborah
Ectoplasm?
Pickman. No.
Oh.
But that's a good guess. Deborah Pickman has written a book about their experiences.
Oh. We're all authors deep down. You did it? No, you didn't.
I'm just kidding.
That'd be funny if I did. For like 2 seconds. I was like, no, she's shitting me.
I'm just kidding. I don't read. I do, but not this book. But I did read an interview that she did with Fiona Dodwell, who runs Study Paranormal. It's a blog on WordPress. And in that interview, Deborah talks a little bit about how she was more open to the paranormal and her husband was very religious and sort of closed off.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound familiar to you? I'm just saying. I guess like that was supposed to be explaining why he might have gotten more intense interactions. Like he was closed off. So whatever was there trying to communicate was trying harder with him. Fiona asked when they really knew they had a haunting. And Deborah said, quote, I guess I would have to say the night that all the stuffed animals in the nursery were moved into a circle in the middle of the room. That was like the shocking in-your-face realization for the three of us. It was hard to deny that something was happening and some unseen force or energy was responsible for what we were repeatedly experiencing. So that's very creepy. If you're watching in real time, some just animals, stuffed animals move on their own.
No, much less move into a circle.
And that's really, really weird.
No, my Furby would go off in my closet randomly, and that was enough for me to just kick that thing right into the basement. Never saw it again.
Mine too. I actually took the batteries out of my Furby and it still made noise, and that was very off-putting. So I think I would just leave all my stuffed animals outside if they just decided to have a powwow in the middle of my room by themselves without me. What are they talking about? Me.
Rude.
My stuffed animals would gossip about me, I think. But so the stuffed animals and the dolls in a circle and moving on their own is supposedly a common occurrence at the Sallie house. In Ghost Adventures, they actually had a setup very similar to this, and there was a panda bear in the circle of stuffed animals. It moves on its own. There's a static camera shot at it at that circle, and you can see it move on its own. I will say, for all my skepticism for Ghost Adventures, I rewound this part of the footage and played it over and over again, trying to see if there was any way they could manipulate this bear off camera. And it really did seem like it was moving on its own. Of course, like grain of salt, they could manipulate it with editing video after the fact. And I do like recognize that and I do acknowledge it. However, it creeped me out enough to be like, I'm going to pause this episode after studying this and come back to it. And it creeps me out even more because I did find another clip from KMBC that did a brief story on the Sallie house. And they have a clip of a football that moves on its own after a flashlight is turned off during an investigation. And I'm going to show, Jennifer, I'm going to show you this clip now briefly, and then I'll link the video to our sources so you guys can all see. But I want to have your impression. So because it's not my footage, we're going to cut it out, but I want to show you what the footage actually is.
Wow.
So that is the clip.
It was like deliberate.
Yeah, it was very deliberate. And you can see from the clip, nobody's moving their hands. Nobody's touching that flashlight or that football. And I don't believe the flooring is so uneven that it would move that significantly on its own from like the floor being uneven. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those are two pieces of evidence that supposedly kind of bolster at least something is playing in the nursery.
Do they think that the nursery was like the old operating room or something?
I'm not sure. I couldn't see like what they thought was like the layout before, because it doesn't make sense for Sallie to haunt the nursery if she wasn't living there. It wasn't her nursery. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I do lean towards maybe it was the operating room or operating area, but I also am not sure because it is upstairs and the offices and exam rooms were supposedly downstairs and the family lived upstairs.
Oh, I see.
So I'm not really sure. It could be that, Sally is also a little girl, so she's more drawn to childlike things in a childlike room.
Mm-hmm.
So Deborah also said eventually that with the severity of the violent attacks, they suspected Sallie was not actually a girl, but something much darker and more evil. They also said that they had felt multiple spirits, and that kind of correlates with that like second version of the story I told you, where people have reported a middle-aged woman who's angry and violent.
Right.
Deborah did not say in the interview that's exactly what she felt, but she did say that she thought there was multiple spirits. Deborah and Tony don't specify, at least in everything that I've read, that it would be like a middle-aged woman. They just say that they there's multiple things there. And given that Tony was regularly getting welts and scratches, I guess they kind of were leaning towards something more sinister than just an angry middle-aged woman's spirit. On the Ghost Adventures episode with Zach, he invites Tony and Deb to the house to do like an initial beginning of the investigation. They also have Anissa Buhay, who is a child medium, which, girl, where are your parents? How did they sign this release form? Because I mean, like, no offense to the parents, obviously, but like, if this is a dark demonic entity that's like hurting people, not my psychic child.
Well, and it seems like it was pretty well known that the dude was beat up by this thing.
Yeah, it was like the main report was like it got attached to Tony and like it hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
And really messed with his head, like not only physically touched him, but like was mentally traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like if my child was an empath and medium, I would probably like, they're like, oh. So they claim that Anissa doesn't have any knowledge of this home either, which if she's from Kansas, I kind of doubt. And if she's from Atchison, I don't believe at all.
Right.
Because this is a big story. And at any rate, even if she didn't know and she was going in blind, I have to believe her parents knew. And again, I don't know. Where are your parents? Like, I just want to know. But I mean, she's there. And before they go in, they do check Tony's body to make sure he has no scratches, as sort of like a control.
Well, that's good.
Which I do think was pretty smart. Like, you can't say like, oh, he might have had that before going in, because they do like lift up his shirt and show he has nothing on him.
Let me make sure that you have no scratches, because we all know you're about to get beat up in here.
Right. Like, you're going in knowing that something is going to hurt you. So let's make sure that you don't have anything.
We got to get the evidence, dude. Do it for the vine.
Right. Do it for Zach Bagans. While they're doing this investigation, though, like they're in like the living room area and they're just kind of starting and talking, and Anissa becomes very disoriented and sick, and she has to sit down on the couch. And at that same time, Jay, one of the cameramen, feels a burning sensation on his arm. And then when they take off his jacket, he does have a scratch forming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like things pop off right away. It does not waste any time. Anissa was at that, like right after that, saying there was a bad spirit that doesn't leave her alone in the house. And it won't leave her alone until everybody, including Tony, goes down into the basement, which I guess is a very active place in this house for dark entities, because there's a remnants of a pentagram, allegedly. There's a picture of...
Mai is shocked.
Mai cannot believe it. They all go down except for Zach Bagans. And it's because he says that there's a lot of mold contamination down there.
Oh, he doesn't want a headache.
And we all know that Zach has asthma.
That's very serious.
It is serious. I have asthma. I'm not like knocking
It's very
people
serious.
that have asthma.
I am
But
surprised that he doesn't have his huge ass respirator with him at all times, though.
me too. And I do think it's just funny that he says like there's a whole bunch of mold and like nobody's making the connection of that's maybe why people are getting headaches and feel sick. I'm not a sermon, just a thought. Just saying.
Maybe call an inspector to make sure you don't have black mold in your basement.
Right.
It is an old house.
And while they're all down there, they're complaining of feeling sick and nauseous. And the little girl psychic like legit almost passes out.
How old is this little girl psychic?
She's like, I want to say 14 at the most.
Okay.
She's a little girl. I'm not saying like I'm 30 now, so sometimes I say little girl, I mean like a 19-year-old, but like she's little. But she legit almost passes out. And because of after saying like an evil spirit was kind of bearing down and laughing at them. But at the same time, she's kind of like swaying and somebody has to grab onto her. Tony gets a welt on the back of his head, like he's been struck by like a burned, like a branding kind of iron.
Oh yeah.
And he gets a welt. Again, this is another point in the video where I really like slowed down things and I rewound the footage because at every angle they showed, and I do like this episode of Ghost Adventures because they do show pretty much every angle that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And at every angle, nothing seems to touch him. You can see where he like reaches back to touch his head after like he felt something burn him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they get back upstairs and shine the light, you can see the welt. But at every angle, you don't see anybody actually hit him or like cause anything that would make a burn. So I just thought that was interesting. But I'm going to rewind just briefly to the pentagrams because those really confused me. When I saw them in Ghost Adventures, I was like, Ghost Adventures explained it that after the Pickmans moved out, a woman moved in and was doing satanic rituals, and she was a witch. This confused me. So I went looking to see if there was any other ghost like stories or legends about this woman. And I found a Reddit where user the Dark Arrow 11 asked for clarification, which I appreciate because he was confused and I was confused. And they already asked the question. And luckily for me, Disillusioned Wanderer answered the question.
Oh, great.
And they said, as far as Les, who is the landlord of Sallie House, knew, she was very solitary, and there was not anyone in the home with her. In fact, they don't think that she kind of lived there at all, that she was just using it for rituals. She said, if you're asking if vandals broke in and did it, the answer would be no. There were no pentagrams or strange markings in the home prior to this woman moving in. And when she moved out, the landlord noticed the pentagrams, names, and other markings in the basement and almost immediately painted over them, which I guess is not the right way to get rid of pentagrams.
What, like you use bleach? How do you?
I don't know. I think that you're supposed to do some sort of protection ritual.
Oh.
To like get rid of like, I guess like break the circle. I'm not really sure, but I'm guessing you're not supposed to just paint over them. The second pentagram, which she says like is visible in these pictures, but on the Reddit there was no pictures, so I'm not sure what she's talking about. It was drawn by a demonologist who was attempting to recreate what the landlord had painted over.
I see.
And so from what we've heard from the Pickmans, this is what this user says, and what was included in Les's interview with wherever they're getting their information from, they didn't cite the source, which was kind of like, This woman wasn't exactly pleasant. In fact, she was really abrasive towards the Pickmans and unwilling to share her side of the story when they tried to get to the root of the rumors surrounding her time at the house.
So she moved in before or after them? I'm sorry.
She moved in after them. But I guess it's very confusing because I'm not sure if the Pickmans own this house or they were renting this house. I believe that maybe they were renting it, but they're friends with the landlord. And so I guess the Pickmans and the landlord were kind of wanting her to explain why she did the pentagram, or like what she was doing in the house.
I see.
And she was just very standoffish and abrasive. Like with the landlord, I can kind of see like you should answer his questions. It's their house that you're living in. But if the Pickmans didn't own this house and they were just friends with the landlord and they also were interested because they had lived in the house and experienced these things, she kind of doesn't owe you anything.
Well, it could have been a thing of like, were you doing this to figure out what is haunting the house, or were you doing this as like a separate thing?
Yeah. And so, like I said, I couldn't find any of the pictures that they were talking about on the Reddit post. So I'm not really sure what the first pentagram looked like versus the one the supposed demonologist recreated to see exactly what she was doing. But if I do find them before the episode airs, I'll post them to the Instagram to let you guys know. It still confuses me that why this woman would have been using this house specifically for rituals. I guess
because you don't conjure where you carve.
Well,
no,
no.
Brave.
Oh. I was like, I've only seen Brave once. I'm sorry.
She gets. I just watched it when I was dying, because you watch Disney movies when you're dying to make yourself feel better.
Comfort yourself.
She gets out of the hut and then walks back in.
Got you.
And she says, "You don't conjure where you carve."
That makes sense. And like, by the way, this is not like a witch slander podcast. I have support for Wiccans and witches who are trying to do whatever they want in a positive way. But this woman was supposedly doing things in a dark or malicious sort of rich. Yeah. So it also just confuses me, like how she comes to play in everything, because Deb and Tony already said that they had an entity that felt dark and demonic. So if she was there afterwards, was she just trying to pull on the powerful entity that was already there, or like make it more powerful if she was actually doing these satanic dark rituals?
Right. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. I don't know if you know, but we'll see. During this investigation with Ghost Adventures, they do have a lot of fear. You get a lot of fearful reactions out of Zach. At one point, he says, "What are you to Sallie?" And all he gets is like banging upstairs, which that's enough for me. Bye. What are you? Scary. Okay, let's go.
If we have learned anything, we realized Kristen's paranormal investigations would last all of 15 minutes.
Listen, I would get what I came for and just skedaddle out of there. I wouldn't linger just for a few extra EVPs. So, right. Whatever the case with the pentagrams and like the dark entity, it adds a layer to this house. And paranormal investigators, I guess, feed off of this. A lot of paranormal investigating teams besides Ghost Adventures have gone in. I found some videos of EVPs that are pretty compelling, along with a spirit box session with child voices in the nursery. Okay. I'm not gonna play them for you because the spirit box feedback noise is very, very loud, and I know how you feel about that. So I will link them, and people can listen to them. But it does really sound like a little girl coming through, and she says, "I love you," and she says hello. So she seems kind of cute. I don't know. Maybe this is why I shouldn't go into houses like this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, like, in all of the movies and stories that we have seen when it comes to demonic possessions, they never start out just straight scary.
Yeah. And I just think that I would be the type of person totally taken in by a little kid ghost that's like pretending to be a little kid and actually is a demon.
You would fall for the demonic MLM.
Yes.
Hey, hon.
Yeah, exactly. I got some, fire and torture down here for you. Come on in. When I was in high school, a friend actually, real quick, she posed this question to me. We were driving along and it was at night. And she was like, if you saw a child, like if you saw like a toddler or something, a baby on the side of the road, would you like stop to pick it up and help it? And I was like, yeah, of course. And she's like, that's why you would die first. Because like she was like hinting at that, like, obviously if a child or a baby in a car seat was on the side of the road in the middle of the night, it's most likely somebody like trying to lure you into
No,
something
no.
nefarious.
Let me tell you this story real quick.
Okay.
You remember a couple years back when my brother was driving down the road? He has it on his dash cam.
Oh yeah.
There was a child on a 4-lane street,
Right.
busy main road in our hometown. And there was a child walking down it. This child was like 4. Her house was on that main road, but it was one of those long ass driveways. Grandmother didn't even know that she was missing. And she was wandering on the road. You can hear his tires squealing. He had to slam on the brakes and he stopped his car, parked it, and got out and grabbed the kid out of the road.
Right. But that was during the day, right?
It was, but I would do the same thing at night.
See, I would too. And now I'm validated because your brother saved a child and also did not get kidnapped or murdered.
And there
And I
was that
just,
girl in Ackworth that got hit by the car that was wondering, that was 10 o'clock at night. She was 10 years old. She got hit by the
that's
car.
right.
No malicious intent. Kids wander and it
See,
takes a village.
see, exactly. So now I'm validated. Maybe I wouldn't
And
be
now
taken in
people
by a
know.
demon.
No, now we know that we would both be kidnapped.
Now people know how to kidnap and get us on the side of the road at night. But yeah, so I'm sure I would be cautious with any haunting given my past and now my present. But other events that have been witnessed by the visitors of the Sallie house include, like I said, unexplained scratches, bruising, and welts on their bodies during and after the visits. It's not just happening to Tony, it's now happening to people who stay overnight at the Sallie house and some people who take the daily, hourly tours. Batteries that are full immediately and completely are drained and they shut off. Investigation. Me too. I'm so
Sorry.
depleted.
Go ahead. I'll stop interrupting
No,
you.
you don't have. I like it. But like, I mean, we're already on empty. So just imagine us going into a haunted house. We're just crawling on the floor.
We would have no paranormal experiences because they would try to draw energy from us and they'd be like, oh shit, they're already
They
on
have
E. They're
right.
about to join us at this point. Somebody pour them a
Exactly.
glass.
Yeah. Welcome them with the ghost wine. But video and investigative equipment stop working, which is a kind of run-of-the-mill haunting
Yeah,
sort
that
of
happens.
thing. Moving objects, things thrown, mysterious coldness, which is all run-of-the-mill, and trained guide dogs apparently refuse to enter the nursery. Dogs really don't like the nursery. My cat would just go in there and sit right down, but I guess dogs don't like it.
And the nursery, like you said, is upstairs.
It's upstairs.
Huh.
Isn't that weird? Maybe
I mean, it's gonna I won't. I know you're about to say maybe you'll have something that'll enlighten. I won't. I have something that will make you more confused.
Oh no. Well, all right. So that's pretty much all I have for the paranormal side. With all of this, you can currently take ghost tours of the Sallie house and stay overnight, like I said. Overnight stays from November to August are $125 per person. September, October, it's $150. And hourly self-guided tours are $20 a person. So I don't feel like I feel like that's not bad, right?
I mean, if people are coming out with burns and scratches, I probably wouldn't, pay $150 to get beat up.
You have to pay me $150. Just kidding.
Let's say I can ask someone to do that for free, probably, but $20 self-guided ghost tour, I probably still wouldn't go in if people are getting hurt. No, if multiple people are getting hurt, like not just one targeted person, I don't think I would open myself up to that.
That's true. That's a smart move. I thought maybe
I
like
might get kidnapped, but I'm not going to get possessed.
Listen, which is worse? I would like to say one last thing before we go into the history. Deborah Pickman in this interview with Fiona, she did write this book, and we know how I feel about writing books after Amityville. But in the interview, she did say, quote, money was never a factor or offered in exchange for going public with our story. In the end, it was the hope of getting a level of help and understanding for our own experiences to perhaps let others who might be going through paranormal events of their own know that they are not alone. And I would like to asterisk this quote with this interview was in 2014. So that's all I
Gotcha.
got. And that's all I
Interesting.
got.
Well,
I would like to also point out there was one ghost picture that I was able to find,
okay.
and I'll show you real quick. It's on the stairs leading up to the nursery of the Sallie house. And there it is. Hold on. There we go. There you go. That's the only ghost picture I was able to find.
Is it falling down the stairs?
I don't
Like it, I'm not saying that to be like
That's
it
what
looks
I
like
thought.
a head is going face first. Like that's a reenactment of me all through high school.
That's a reenactment of me when I first moved here, going down my slick Florida rain steps.
Or if you look at it going the other direction, that's like everybody running up their stairs when a demon is chasing them.
I mean, maybe he was scared of the person chasing them with this camera. It just looks like a brown to dark brown misty blob going
Yeah.
up or down the stairs.
The color is interesting because usually it's like white or black, you know?
Right. So, but that was the
Unless
only
you're a woman, then you're in red.
right. Or black or red. Yeah, red or white or black. Yeah.
This is the man in brown.
This is the man in brown. There's nobody else. There's never any woman in blue, you know?
We'll find her somewhere.
A nice sage green. Anyway, so that was the only picture I found.
Well, that was compelling. Like I saw the pictures of Tony and like the scratches and stuff.
Right.
Which is intense.
Right. They are intense. And so I think that I'm at least for their sake, I'm glad that they're not living there anymore, because it really does seem that he got the brunt of the action. And something coming at you day after day like that would be very draining.
He was also running on E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On fumes.
Well, I will give you the history of the house when we get back from our break.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. We are back.
We're back, and Jennifer has told me that I did not do my job very well, and I missed something apparently.
I didn't say that.
She said we paused to take a break, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're the worst." No, just kidding.
That is a toxic mindset.
No, but you did say that I apparently missed a legend about somebody, but so I'm interested. I'm like interested for you to tell me, because I did not see this name at all when I was researching.
Do you want me to tell you the legend first before I go into the history?
Yeah.
Okay. Like you said, this is still legend. I'm not talking history. Just to clarify, this is legend.
It's alleged. Alleged legend.
Alleged legend. I love that. The legend goes that next door on the same property that was built by James Finney, who was the doctor's brother, that house was deeded to a woman named Joanna Barnes. Joanna was a recently divorced mother of 3 and was also pregnant at the time. She had previously been institutionalized in the state hospital of Topeka for mental instability, and neighbors also provided evidence to a judge that she was violently insane. In July of 1899, her baby was born. His name was Frank. She was eventually released from custody to Dr. Finney and returned to the home that his brother built. So it was right next door.
Gotcha.
On September 24th, 1906, Joanna attempted suicide by turning on the gas in a downstairs room and laid down on a cot with her 6-year-old son. They were both overcome by fumes. She survived, but he did not.
Oh my goodness.
So that is what they're saying.
Happened on the property next door.
Right.
I did not know anything about this. That's
And that she was a patient of Dr. Finney.
got you. That's so wild. I did not see anything about that.
But I can clear that up.
Oh, okay.
I can
It's
answer
very
that question.
It's very like instant gratification.
I have a lot of information. This, like I was telling you, was very reminiscent of the Bell Witch for me because there is drama. These people in Atchison, Kansas, Texas, love their drama. And the people who are sharing all the goods are the good old people over at the Atchison Daily Globe. I would say 99.9% of the articles that I'm quoting are from the Atchison Daily Globe. And you can also, I did not check every single one of them because I'm not paying to look at old newspapers, but you can go to newspapers.com, search the Atchison Daily Globe for this time period and pay that money to look at old newspapers, and you can actually see the scanned copies of the newspaper clippings.
Cool.
Again, I did not do that. So
if you would like to donate to our fund so Jennifer can look at newspaper clippings,
that would be
let us know.
In exchange for that, I will send you one pun a day.
Oh, that'd be so nice, actually.
I'll do that for you for free.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess let's get started.
Okay.
Unless you had something funny to say, then go ahead and say it.
No, I was just gonna be like, what can I give you? I can write out fake newspaper clippings and just give them to you.
I have a general timeline of the house and the owners, but just a fair warning, a lot of people die.
Oh man.
So just bear with me. There are a lot of characters in this, kind of like I said, the Bell Witch.
Mm-hmm.
I really love this because it kind of gives you insight that, like, yeah, these are ghost stories, and yeah, they're kind of fun to like be ooh spooky, but these were actually real people. Like they actually existed. And you kind of are able to see their lives in this information that I was able to find. So it is pretty cool.
I love it.
So I'm going to start way back in 1854 in Lexington, Missouri, when 32-year-old, fresh off the boat Irish immigrant Michael Finney married 16-year-old Catherine Catherines, who is also born of Irish immigrants.
No. Oh, Catherine. Why did you get married at 16?
To a 32-year-old.
To a 32-year-old. It's just yikes.
But it was 1854. They didn't live that long, so they got to get started early.
Yes, I know. I just will always have a little bit of a cringe moment inside.
I put that on there and I was like, Kristen's going to love this.
Oh, no.
So they have a son, James Finney, while they still lived in Missouri in 1856. And then 7 months later, they moved to Atchison. Michael, who is the father, was a wharf master and a merchant. Do you know what a wharf master is?
Doesn't that have something to do with water?
Well, when you Google it, it tells you that it's a master of the wharf, and it is the most useless definition you will ever Google. Right. They're pretty much in charge of overseeing the wharf, which is like a port.
But it's Kansas. I'm just saying what body of water is. I'm just saying.
I check my sources with history. I don't check them with geography.
I'm just saying it could be that he was a master of wharfs.
The Missouri River goes right through Atchison.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kansas. I mean, when I think like a port, I think like, you know, a coastal port, because I'm a coastal state gal.
You don't have to live on the coast to have water around you.
I know. I have coastal privilege. I'm sorry. So the Missouri, he was the master of the wharf for the river. I get it.
Anyway, so he was a wharf master, and he also had a general store right on the levee where the family lived in 2 rooms over that general store. Mm-hmm. In 1858, they had a little girl named Maria, who was born June 19th. However, she died at age 15 months in September of 1859. In 1861, Agnes Finney was born October 30th, and her nickname was Aggie.
I love that name.
Mm-hmm. Charles Finney was born February 1st, 1865, and in 1866, Michael acquired property lots 9 and 10, which is where 504 and 508 North 2nd Street houses sit. And just to clarify, the star of the show is 508 North 2nd Street.
That's Sallie House.
That is the Sallie House. But that was not built until 1867.
Gotcha.
And that was the family's main residence. They moved in from the Wharf House to the North House. In 1872, Michael died in the house at 10 o'clock p.m. His obituary read, quote, "On Friday night at 10 o'clock, Michael Finney, on the 51st year of his age, died. The deceased was one of the oldest citizens of Atchison, having settled here in early 1856. He was engaged for many years in business as a forwarding and commission merchant and was known and respected as an enterprising, intelligent, and honorable businessman. His funeral will take place today at 2 o'clock from his residence on 2nd Street."
Wow. So he was respected. And also, he was only 51 years old. And that was like the oldest person. He was like one of the oldest people.
So the family moved there when the city of, or the county of Atchison was very first established. Like they moved there the
Gotcha.
same year. So not one of like the oldest age wise, but the oldest existing like citizen.
As a citizen. Yeah. Okay.
Right. The longest resident. So I was looking at this and then I realized it says their son Richard was born 8 months later. So I guess Catherine was pregnant when her husband died, and she might have not even known that she was pregnant yet. Because it's not like they had those digital pregnancy tests in 1800s.
That's true.
So that is sad. What is sadder is that Richard didn't make it. He died the following year, September 29th. So that just leaves their 3 children total: James, Agnes, and Charles. James, the firstborn son, built the house on 504, which is right next door, in 1879, because what else are you supposed to do at the age of 23?
Get married to a 14-year-old and build a house.
His dad hadn't done that yet, so technically his timeline is still okay.
That's true.
If James was a girl, though, he'd be an old spinster at this point.
That's also true.
In 1879, the 504 house that James built ends up being deeded to James. And then there's record of a mortgage deed to a David A. Bond. James then gave the lot back to his mother in 1881. In 1882, Charles, the youngest, began working for Dr. Holland, and Kate, the same year, deeded the land for 504, which is still the house next door, to Mrs. Catherine Bays. And I'm going to tell you the exchange of properties a couple of times, but it will make sense in the long run, I promise.
Okay.
In 1883, James moved to St. Louis and became a salesman. And we're going to jump forward past some drama that we'll get to later, because right now we're just sticking to the property and not the players that are on the property, but we'll get to the drama, I promise. In 1899, the lot for 504 is deeded to a Joanna Barnes.
Okay. So she's there.
But it's noted that she is a single woman, and there was a mortgage that was dated for the same day for 130 that was held by Catherine Bays. So it sounds like Mrs. Bays deeded the property to Joanna. So there's a couple of exchanges of hands.
Gotcha.
James died in Leavenworth, Kansas in 1900 at the age of 44. And like I said, their obituaries were super interesting to me to read. Like it kind of gave you an idea of the person behind the story. So I just kind of wanted to share. His says, James K. Finney of Atchison died at 10 o'clock last night. Another 10 o'clocker. That's weird.
Yeah, that is kind of strange.
At Evergreen Hospital, Leavenworth, where he had been for the past 8 or 9 months, suffering with paresis of the brain. Do you know what that is?
No, but it sounds bad.
It's brain syphilis.
Oh, yeah, that is bad. It's so bad.
It's not the best. The deceased was born at Liberty, Clay County, Missouri in 1856 and was the eldest son of Mrs. Kate Finney of Atchison. His parents removed to Atchison, which is a weird way to say moved, to Atchison when he was 7 months old, and his home was here until 1883, because this was written by the Atchison Daily Globe.
Right.
His home was here until 1883 when he went to St. Louis and became a salesman for the L.M. Rumsey Manufacturing Company, dealers in hardware and plumber supplies, and eventually became one of the best posted men in his line in the country.
Ooh, impressive.
He was a brother of Dr. C.C. Finney and Miss Aggie Finney. The remains were brought to Atchison this morning, and a funeral will occur at 10 a.m. No flowers.
Don't bring him.
He didn't like them.
If you see one flower, get rid of it. But it's interesting that he died at 10 p.m. and his funeral is at 10 a.m. too.
It's a lot of tens. So Charles, the youngest, married Louise Zeibold in 1904, and he moved into 510 North 2nd Street, which is 2 houses down from the Sallie house.
Gotcha.
They moved in there in 1905. In 1905, a mortgage deed is drafted for a Joanna Barnes and is held by a Robert McCree for some home improvements. In 1905, Charles builds a rental home on 516 North 2nd Street, a couple houses down the street. So now they have like a couple of houses on North 2nd Street.
They have like a row.
Yeah. And in 1906, Joanna deeds the lot for 504 back to Agnes for $300. So she improved the home and then she sold it back to the Finneys. And
she was an entrepreneur.
Off she goes into the world. In 1907, Charles and Louise have a son, Charles H., on February 17th. And I guess 1908 must have been a really good year for Dr. Finney because he turned into Mr. Monopoly and he got 520 North and 522nd North as rental homes, as well as 524th North, that's a good one, as his storefront.
All right. And then he passed go how many times?
Well, in 1912, he also gets 604 North as a rental home. And since he already owns an entire street, he might as well just be elected mayor.
Wow.
No kidding. He was elected in 1913.
I mean, the half the town was already his, so I guess that makes sense.
However, he stepped down as mayor in 1916.
Why?
I'll tell you. But you have to wait.
Damn.
So in 1913, Agnes marries William True, and they live in Rouleau, Nebraska. In 1916, her husband, William, suffers a stroke of paralysis while they were on a trip in Wyoming, and then Agnes ends up bringing him back to Atchison to live. He ends up passing in 1918. So just 2 years later, after spending the previous 3 days unconscious. And because they give such good information, here is William's obituary as well. William A. True, for 28 years, a Burlington engineer, died at the home of Mrs. True's mother, Mrs. Kate Finney, at 508 North 2nd Street at 7 o'clock this morning. He suffered a stroke of paralysis 18 months ago while on a pleasure trip with Mrs. True in Wyoming and was brought here immediately afterwards. He had been unconscious since last Wednesday. Mr. True was known as Billy True, from the smallest urchin along the Rouleau branch of the Burlington to the superintendent of the division, and his hundreds of friends will be grieved to learn of his death. He was 56 years old, was born at Union, Nebraska, December 2nd, 1861. 5 years ago, he married Miss Agnes Finney at Rouleau, and they lived there until he was stricken, when she brought him to Atchison, where he would receive better medical attention. There are 3 grown children by a former marriage. 18 of his 28 years with the Burlington, He was engineer of the freight train running between Atchison and Rouleau. Oh, does that make sense how they met?
Oh, she was on the train.
On the train.
How romantic.
Prior to that time, he was an engineer out of Nebraska City. I took off he had a service at the local church, and then he was buried at the same cemetery as everybody else. Mount
Did he
Calvary
get
Cemetery.
flowers?
They didn't say anything about the flowers. James' obituary was the only one that specified no flowers.
Well, I don't know. I was gonna say something. So with a paralysis, what do you think that means in that time period? Like a stroke, maybe?
Well, it says a stroke of paralysis. So he might have actually had a stroke and it paralyzed him.
Yeah.
But he seemed like a really great guy.
They all so far have seemed really great.
Yeah. So just to recap, it was William, Agnes, and Kate living at the Sallie house at this point.
Okay.
And then Charles lived
a few houses down.
Yeah. And then his office was 524.
So it was not Sallie house.
No.
Got you.
After being ill with gangrene for several months, Kate, or Catherine, passes of sepsis June 14th, 1918, at the age of 80.
Wow, she's lived a long time.
And listen to her absolute glowing obituary. Mrs. Kate Finney, who had lived in Atchison 62 years, died at 9:30 last night at the family residence, 510 North 2nd Street.
So she died at Charles's place.
I think that somebody miswrote this because William died in 1918 as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in his obituary, it says that he died at the home of Mrs. True's mother, Miss Kate Finney, 508 North 2nd Street. So it's the same year.
Maybe it's.
I mean, they own like 16 houses on that street.
I'm saying they own like all of Atchison. She could have died anywhere and have been family residence.
You know, you're not wrong with that. Anyway, back to this glowing review. She had been ill since last October and bedfast since February 4th. So maybe she did move in with Charles.
That's what I'm saying.
She died as the result of septicemia from a gangrenous foot.
Ugh.
That came as a result of old age. She was 80 years old. Watching beside her when death came were her two children, Dr. C.C. Finney and Mrs. Agnes True, both of whom had been tender, loving, devoted to their mother, not only during her last illness, but all their lives. Mrs. Finney was born in February 1838 in Middlebury, Vermont. Her maiden name was Catherine's. When an infant, Mrs. Finney's parents took her to Huntsville, Alabama, and from there she went with her parents to Lexington, Missouri, where her marriage to M.C. Finney, Michael Finney, occurred. She came with her husband to Atchison in 1856. He was an important man here, was wharf master, was a commissioned merchant, and had a general merchandise store on the levee. He and his wife had lived in 2 rooms over the store until 47 years ago when they moved into the house on North 2nd Street, where he died in 1872 and where his widow died last night. It was a misprint. Get it together, Atchison Globe.
We got it down to the bottom of it.
We just have to keep reading.
You just have to keep going, and sometimes your questions get answered.
It's true. 5 children were born to Mr. and Mrs. Finney. 2 died in infancy. James K. Finney died 18 years ago, and Dr. C.C. Finney and Mrs. True survive. Also, 1 grandchild, Charles, son of Dr. and Mrs. Finney. Mrs. Finney was a woman of the old school. Her home was her kingdom, and she ruled it wisely.
Wow.
She never belonged to a women's club and did not engage in any public work. She believed that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, and her influence was an inspiration to her children. She lived to see her son, Dr. C.C. Finney, become mayor and one of the prominent men of the city where she had lived for so many years. She loved all her children, of course, but her son, Charlie, was her idol, and his devotion to her was her reward. Her daughter, Mrs. True, was tender, devoted, faithful, and the 2 were affectionate companions.
Tell me you have a favorite without telling me you have a favorite until your obituary.
Tell me who wrote the obituary.
Gee, I don't know.
So Mr. Monopoly was not finished wiping the board. In 1920, he also acquired 701 North and 705 North as rental homes. So for the people at home keeping count, that is 4 rental homes, a storefront, and a house. In 1920, Agnes begins taking in boarders, and on November 28th, 1939, she passes away at midnight in the house. She also has a glowing review in the Daily Globe. Mrs. Agnes Finney True, 79, widow of William A. True, Burlington Railroad locomotive engineer, died at midnight last night in her home, 508 North 2nd Street, from infirmities due to advanced age. Mrs. True had been ill for the past 3 years. She was a lifelong resident of this city. A daughter of Michael and Kate Finney, pioneer residents of this city, Agnes Marie Finney was born in Atchison, October 30th, 1861. Her parents came to Atchison about 1855, a year after the city was organized, and her father was wharf master here when there was a great deal of boat traffic on the Missouri River.
We just needed to get a little bit further in the story before I made assumptions about Kansas not having water. I'm sorry.
When Agnes Marie Finney was 6 years old, her father built the home on North 2nd Street. She spent the remainder of her life there. She was educated at Mount St. Scholastica Convent. In 1915, Miss Finney was united in marriage to William A. True of Rilo, Nebraska. Mrs. True was a good, kind-hearted, and charitable woman who had a great many friends. A veteran reporter on the Globe remembers that when young, Mrs. True was considered one of the prettiest girls in Atchison.
Oh, somebody had a crush on her.
She carried the popularity of her youth through life. Many years ago, when waltzing was the fashion of the day, Mrs. True was envied by all of her girlfriend acquaintances for her ability at dancing. She possessed a mirror-like memory which age failed to dim and often supplied the Globe with information concerning bygone days. She was
This obituary writer had a crush on Aggie this whole time, and that's why all of these obituaries are so nice.
She was a communicant of St. Benedict's Church, a member of the St. Anne's Altar Society, and a charter member of the Atchison Music Club. They're like the best review, like their reviews.
Yeah.
They are Google reviews of people's lives.
Yeah. And
5 stars.
This is not historically accurate, and I don't care because I don't do that part. I am saying that there was an unrequited love of somebody at the Globe and Agnes, and they're like, if I can't love her in life, I'm going to celebrate her in death. So.
The people at the Globe they love their job, everybody, because all of the, I'll get there, but all of the newspaper articles are just, they're good. So carrying on down the timeline, in 1947, Mr. Monopoly himself, Charles Finney, passes away on the 24th of March. And here is his review, which is just shy of a biography.
Oh, gosh.
After an illness of several years, Dr. C.C. Finney, 82, retired physician, mayor of Atchison from 1913 to 1916, and previously a member of the city council, died in a Topeka hospital Sunday. He retired from active practice in 1939 and devoted his time to his extensive property interests, no kidding, in Northwest Atchison. During his practice of medicines from 1894 to 1939, 45 years, he officiated about half the births which occurred at Atchison during that period.
Wow.
Born in Atchison, February 1st, 1965, Dr. Finney was a son of Michael and Kate Catherines Finney. His father was an early wharf master here when steamboat traffic was heavy on the Missouri River. He is survived by his wife, a son, Dr. C.H. Finney, who...
Oh, so his son's a doctor too?
Yes.
Okay. That's cool.
His son is at 508 North 2nd Street.
Dun, dun, dun.
And a grandson, Robert G. Finney. The Dr. C.H. Finney home is next door to the Dr. C.C. Finney residence at 510 North 2nd Street, in which Dr. and Mrs. C.C. Finney went to housekeeping after their marriage and lived the entire 43 years of their married life. Dr. Finney received his MD degree from Beaumont Hospital Medical College, St. Louis, now the St. Louis University Medical School, in 1894. He served in the city council several years before his marriage, November 9th, 1904, to Louise Ziebold, I'm so sorry, daughter of Herman and Rosa Ziebold of Atchison. He was a charter member of Atchison Lodge number 647, BPO Elks, and was active many years in the Old Eagles, Moose, and Central Protective parentheses anti-horse thief lodges.
What a specific lodge.
His decision to study medicine was made at the suggestion of Dr. Dan Holland, his first position having been bookkeeper and office assistant to Dr. Holland. Upon his return from medical school, he opened his office in the Martin Building at 5th and Commercial over the present Robertson Drugstore, and during his long practice was associated at different times with Dr. William Bogle, Dr. Virgil Morrison, and for several years before his retirement with his son, Dr. C.H. Finney. He was elected mayor in 1913. The Globe's headline said that the mothers of Atchison had elected him as he had officiated at so many births. Because what else qualifies you as mayor aside from birthing?
Delivering their babies. So, they trusted this man to get their kids in the world.
He's my obstetrician. Why can't he run my city?
Right.
In his practice of medicine, he was examiner for the Metropolitan Insurance Company 40 years, and for 18 years was the Atchison, Missouri Pacific physician. During that period, he held a railroad pass, but only used it once. As mayor, he held a pass to the theaters and attended one time. He was too busy then to spend much time in recreation.
He was far too busy buying up properties and being mayor and birthing babies.
As a young man, he was an expert swimmer and skater and held the skating championship of a wide area.
I'm sorry. I know it means ice skating, but in my head, he's skateboarding.
You're going to really like this next part. He frequently dressed as a girl skater and appeared on the ice billed as Miss Colby of Baltimore, skating so gracefully that few spectators knew his identity. He also held title as roller skating champion of Atchison.
Okay, so wait, when he was when he was dressed up as Miss Colby, which is no shame, I don't care, but when he was dressed up as the Lady of Baltimore, was it ice skating?
Mm-hmm.
Or okay, and then he also was in a roller derby.
He was a champion roller skater.
Okay.
In the 1800s. I didn't even know that they roller skated in the 1800s. I thought that was like a 1900s thing. I had no idea.
Me neither.
But don't worry, I will get into that later too.
Okay.
In 1948, Dick Mize and his family move into 508 North and live in the house for a short period. One of their children is named Sarah, quote, Sallie Margaret Mize.
Okay.
She's still alive.
Damn it. No, I mean, good for her. Let's make that clear. I'm very glad that she's still alive. But
in 1952, Louise Finney, wife of Charles, dies.
Okay.
Her review is not that interesting, but it does state that Dr. and Mrs. Finney began housekeeping in the new house they erected at 510 North 2nd Street, and that was their home the remainder of their lives. So they moved into 510 and they did not
move. They just stayed right there.
And then on December 2nd, 1955, the last of the characters of our story, Charles H. Finney, Dr. Charles, dies of a heart attack at the age of 48. His obituary is also not that glowing. It does talk about how he was a practicing physician. He studied medicine at St. Louis University, which is also where his dad got his medical degree, and received his medical degree in 1931. He interned at St. Mary's Hospital in Kansas City and began practicing in Atchison. He got married in 1931 as well. And then he practiced medicine in Atchison for about 7 years and then entered the armed armed forces in June of 1939. He
Hmm.
served in India 18 months and was stationed in California for a time before he was discharged in December of 1945. He returned to St. Louis University, where he took special work in internal medicine after his separation from the Army. And during the last 7 years, he was a doctor for the Veterans Administration in Kansas City. He was also a member of the Knights of Columbus, and he was a bridge enthusiast and considered one of the best bridge players in the area.
That's interesting. So he left Atchison.
Right. He got his medical degree. It seems like he did practice for a little bit in Atchison. It says he practiced for about 7 years, and then he joined the armed forces and served in India and California, and then went back to school.
It kind of seems like he practiced, and then like after his father retired or like stopped practicing, maybe that's when he stopped practicing, or he practiced a little bit later.
Yeah, because he finished out working for the Veterans Administration in Kansas City.
Yeah.
That was like the last place he lived where he worked. It's still the same. So after this point, the details get a little tricky because, as we've been told, records back in the day are obviously worse than present day.
Oh, well.
So these dates aren't quite exact, but they're good, solid guesses. So from 1958 to 1990, Ethel Anderson lives at 508 North 2nd Street. She's the ex-wife of Dr. W.L. Anderson. And then from 1990 to 1994, thereabouts, at some point, Bobby and Colleen Humbird moved from 504 North 2nd Street to 508 North 2nd Street. Their daughter, Heather, was said to have played with an imaginary friend named Sallie. She later identified a drawing that Tony drew as her friend Sallie that she used to play with.
Got you.
From 1994 to 1997, Deborah and Tony Pickman live at 508 North 2nd Street. And then from 1999 to 2001, Mary Liggett lived at 508 North 2nd Street. 2002, David Leeper lived at 508 North 2nd Street. And then where I'm going to stop is where the investigations start, which was 2008.
Gotcha.
Which Live Sci-Fi TV did the first paranormal investigation of the house with Tim Wood.
Right.
Which is who I got this timeline from. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim Mithy. Probably.
Maybe. So let's get into the players. We know a good bit about Charles, obviously, but we don't know all about Charles. So let me give you some high notes because this guy seemed a little bit wild.
Well, he was a lady of Baltimore. I mean,
while working for Dr. Holland, Charles enjoyed competitive figure skating, as we know. As the December 28th, 1883 edition of the Atchison Daily Globe describes, quote, last evening, the gold medal was awarded to Miss Florence Gruyere and Charles Finney, the best couple skaters. So they got gold medal. He was super good at ice skating and figure skating and also won local competitions and frequently appeared on the ice, as we said, dressed as a female, billed as Miss Colby of Baltimore. He apparently
was the best thing I've ever heard. I just can't get over it.
I was going through this story and I read that line. I was like, well, this took a turn that I would have never guessed.
God, RuPaul is just so proud. I bet.
Oh, no doubt.
They should have an ice skating competition season.
Well, he was apparently so graceful on the ice that nobody could tell a difference. But I guess somebody found out and his outfit pissed people off because when the competition was held again in 1885, a local paper, the Atchison Daily Globe, surely, noted that the event was open to all gentlemen skaters except Charles Finney. Let me quote it.
Rude.
Quote, a prize of $5 in gold to the best gentleman skater in Atchison on New Year's night at the Palace Rink, open to all gentlemen skaters except C.C. Finney. A committee of ladies will give the decision. Admission 10 cents. Skates 5 cents extra.
That's so rude.
Can you just imagine though seeing that and being pissed off for a second, but then but they know who I am.
But but they're saying I'm better than everybody, so they're intimidated by me.
So he decided to drop the ice skates, and that's when he became a champion roller skater instead.
So he went from Blades of Glory to roll bounce. And that's where the real story starts.
The Atchison Daily Globe really loved him, though, because he was in the papers again on October 20th.
My birthday.
A little bit before you were born. This was 1887.
Oh, just like a few years shy of when I was born.
Quote, Charles Finney and W.S. Anderson had a fight this morning, which came about in the way. Begin scene. A few days ago, a Miss Page, sister-in-law of Anderson's, had a pocketbook containing $3 stolen from the dental rooms of Dr. Scholl's. There were present in the room at the time a stranger and Charles Finney. Neither were accused at the time of taking it, and the matter rested with an advertisement in the Globe until yesterday, when Anderson went to Dr. Scholl's and, according to that gentleman's statement and Mr. Reed of the packing house, accused Finney of taking the pocketbook. Finney heard this morning that he had been so accused and went to the store of Mr. Anderson and asked him to step up to the doctor's office and retract his statement. Anderson said he had nothing to retract, and after a few words, Finney struck him over the head several times with a heavy cane.
Good.
Nick Anderson, W.S. Anderson's father, was present and drew a revolver, which he was prevented from using. Anderson claims that all he said was that the taking of the money laid between Finney and the stranger. He refused to cause Finney's arrest, saying that Finney would, in retaliation, cause his father's arrest for drawing a deadly weapon.
The cane?
Not the
other.
The revolver.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
The cane's also deadly too. Violence is never the answer.
So then there are a few more mentions in the paper.
Well, I would like to just...
I can't tell you who stole the pocketbook. I never found out.
But you know what? Listen, not to be biased, but I don't believe that Charles stole it because he's Mr. Monopoly. Why does he need $3?
This was before Mr. Monopoly time.
Oh, Still, he doesn't need your $3 in your cheap handbag.
Oh,
I'm judging. It was a stranger. There was a stranger there too.
There was a stranger.
So
the stranger probably read that article and laughed.
Right. With
the coffee that he bought with his $3.
With the newspaper that he bought with his $3. So I'm just saying, I'm on Charles's side at the moment until you tell me something else. And then maybe I won't be.
You'll probably stay there. All right. So a few more mentions. This is the next day, Friday, October 21st, 1887, from the Atchison Daily Globe. Jim Orr narrowly escaped a thumping some time ago for calling Charles Finney bub. Charles Finney was arrested by Marshal Price yesterday for disturbing the peace and was fined $10 by Judge Baldwin this morning. W.S. Anderson was also arrested on the same charge, but released.
Wow, unfair.
Saturday, October 22nd, 1887, so the next day. To Charles Finney, greeting. You will please take notice that any annoying item that may appear in the Globe in future was printed by mistake.
Just kidding.
I'm sorry. I posted that Facebook status by mistake. Anything that you read about yourself in the future, that was a mistake. Is that not the sassiest thing you have ever read?
Yes. This is like old school TMZ.
It's so bad, but it's good. All right, last thing for Charles. So in 1913, we know he was elected as mayor, but in 1916, he was asked to step down. It was due to a scandal involving selling alcohol at a local Eagles Lodge. That's all I got.
Is that during like Prohibition?
No, it's not, because I checked the dates on that, and that doesn't start till 1920.
Yeah. Maybe you're not supposed to. But I thought like Eagles Lodges and Elks Lodges were where like grandpas go to get a beer. Is that not true? I don't know what they do there.
Maybe he was selling his own beer and it didn't work out.
Maybe.
I did see that his wife's dad was a partner in a local brewery.
Oh, so maybe he was like pushing his
like selling his home brew.
Yeah, that makes sense. Still though.
But anyway,
I mean,
he was
I
asked
thought that was going to be more
to sit down.
scandalous.
No, sorry. I talked it up and then I just dropped it. But he
It's
was a
still, I
figure
mean,
skater.
that dressed as a woman figure skater, and then they like got so intimidated by him he wasn't allowed to compete anymore. I love that.
He did try to get reelected, but it didn't quite work out. There are some pictures of him like pleading, like, don't be an idiot, elect me, essentially.
Mhm.
Look at all the good stuff that I've done, but it didn't quite work out. The whole I delivered your babies thing didn't pan out for him in the long run.
Look how far I can get my leg up from all these years of figure skating.
Look what I can do.
He just starts twirling on the stage really fast on his roller skates.
So that's all I got for Charles. I will give you the pictures of the election flyers for you to put on our Instagram.
Perfect.
They're a pretty good read. So this leaves us with the two characters that I saved for last. Joanna.
Right. Joanna, the single maybe mom, but she in records a single woman.
Correct. There are two Joannas.
Okay.
There's Joanna, and then there's Joanna with an H.
Okay. Johanna.
Joanna with an H. The H stands for hot mess because that woman is a mess. Joanna Barnes was just a single lady that was deeded the house from the Finneys, who fixed it up. She did some renos, made it her own, mid-century modern, and then sold it back to the Finneys and moved on with her life.
She was a flipper before flippers were popular.
Joanna Barnes with an H. There are a few newspaper articles from our favorite people at the Atchison Daily Globe that tell her sad story. And she also lived in Atchison. So this could get very easily confused if you didn't know the simple spelling difference.
Gotcha.
This is 1887, April 9th. A jury before probate judge Scava yesterday afternoon found Joanna Barnes of Cummingsville to be of unsound mind, and she will be sent to the asylum. The woman was not present, the verdict being rendered on the evidence of neighbors, which showed that she was violently insane with a pugilistic tendency.
That's an interesting word.
Do you know what that means?
No.
I didn't either. I Googled it. It means she'll hit you.
Oh no. I thought it was going to mean something like really profound about her mental health. It means she's just going to whack you.
It's another word for boxing. So she'll hit you. And then they say last evening, she dressed herself in her husband's clothes and escaped from her home. It was not found until this afternoon, where she was traced to Parnell and taken to her home. So she escaped wearing her husband's clothes. Hopefully she didn't hit anybody.
She hit him probably to take his clothes. I mean, like, why did she have to escape her house? Was like her husband like trying to keep her in because she was punching people?
Well, the judge found her to be of unsound mind.
No way.
And sentenced her to the asylum. So this is April 14th, 1887, so a couple days later. Mrs. Joanna Barnes, the Cummingsville woman who was adjudged insane a few days ago, will be taken from her home to the asylum at Topeka in a wagon and under the escort of a guard of 4 men. She has become so violent that nothing can be done with her save when her arms are tied behind her, and then it requires a crowd to do anything with her. She was until recently a very popular woman, but the death of her sister affected her mind, and she has grown steadily worse.
So she was grieving, and I don't know, instead of somebody like getting her help, I guess sending her to the asylum is getting her help, but I don't know.
So a couple years later, this is in 1906. So the last article that was written about her in the wonderful Daily Globe was April 14th, 1887. This one's September 24th, 1906. The mood changes.
Oh, okay.
The 6-year-old son of Mrs. Joanna Barnes, formerly of Atchison, was found dead in bed this morning in Kansas City as a result of inhaling gas. Mrs. Barnes herself is in a very critical condition from the same cause. Miss Anna Barnes, a daughter, who is a bookkeeper for James Thayer, left for Kansas City at noon. The woman was once tried for insanity and sent to an asylum, but was later released. A telegram from Kansas City says that the woman undoubtedly attempted to kill herself and son, as she had turned on a gas jet and last night insisted on the boy sleeping in her room. She will recover. Her husband works in the Kansas City Southern shops.
Mm. So that part of the story is true. It's just Kansas City.
Right. And then September 25th, the next day, the Atchison Daily Globe wrote, the remains of Frank Barnes, who was found dead in Kansas City yesterday morning, will be brought to Atchison tomorrow morning and taken to Cummings for burial. His mother, Mrs. Joanna Barnes, is still in a critical condition and may not recover, according to Miss Anna Barnes, who returned to Atchison today. Mr. and Mrs. Barnes, who were divorced, were remarried some time ago. Mrs. Barnes went to Kansas City from Atchison with 2 of her children and soon deserted them, going to Colorado. After the children had been alone for a week, an aunt found them. Then the aunt found the father, and when Mrs. Barnes returned from Colorado, they were remarried.
Oh, I guess he was just like, I guess for the sake of the children, he has to stick together with her. I don't know.
I guess it sounded like she was going through some stuff.
Definitely.
End scene.
That was a roller coaster. I'm gonna tell you. It's very sad. The ending of that story is very sad, but I want to use that word. What was the word?
Pugilistic. I might be saying it wrong. It might be pugilistic, but I feel like pugilistic is right.
Pugilistic is something else involving dogs. We won't go there. I'm gonna use that at work. So one day, I'm just gonna be like, you know what? You need to walk away. I'm feeling very pugilistic today.
People are gonna think that you're nauseous.
They're gonna be like, what's that mean? And I'm just like, you'll see if you don't walk away.
So to sum up my findings.
So you found no concrete little girl named Sallie.
Correct. C.C. Finney never practiced out of 508. He never practiced out of the Sallie house. His son, it sounds like his son did practice there for, I think it said 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So technically something could have happened. But let me tell you, Atchison Daily Globe is on it.
Yeah, they would probably report if a little girl died of appendicitis without anesthesia.
Yeah, I mean, they reported a guy escaping death for calling Charles Bub.
I know. They reported Charles allegedly stealing $3 from a dentist office.
Right. So I feel like this is also conjecture, but I would feel like there would be something about that happening.
And in your timeline, there was a woman that lived in the Sallie house after the Pickmans.
Yes, that was Mary. She lived there from 1999 to 2001.
Right, but I don't want to accuse her of anything. She would be the suspect of the person who
drew the pentagrams.
Right, because she was the person that lived there right after them.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, not accusing her of anything, because it could be not her, and it could be just another story.
Mm-hmm. Also, the Joannas were completely irrelevant to the story.
Right, it's not even the right city of Kansas.
Correct. It kind of like brings the point up of there's stuff that happens outside of written history. Like it doesn't always have to make sense. If the evidence is there, then I mean, it can still be haunted without anybody writing about it.
That's very true. And some of the members of the family did die in that house.
4 people died in that house.
So that's a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And not even to say like it's like a lot of energy that would be causing violent or some of the phenomenon. I'm saying it's like a lot of death in one place could attract maybe something a little darker.
Yeah.
Could make a place vulnerable to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The scratches and the stuff moving on its own gives me enough reason to say that it's haunted. But I don't know. I don't think it's by a little girl named Sallie, which makes those spirit boxes of like this little girl voice very off-putting and very, very gross.
Yep. Because no children died in that house.
Yeah.
The house has some bad energy and you need to be careful going in there and poking around at it.
Yeah, exactly. All of the findings that I've like, all of the stories that I've read, and the photographs of Tony and the ghost adventures of that welt forming, it's not a good place
Mm-mm.
to ghost hunt, I think.
No, but it is a great place to read the gossip columns about.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wish they still did that.
Atchison Daily Globe, you got it. I hope that my obituary is as fabulous as theirs. I'm putting you in charge of writing mine.
Got you. I'll mention that you did not like have any urge to punch people.
I was not pugalicious.
Delicious. So I think as far as like Sallie, the story of Sallie, hoax.
Yeah,
I
I would
think
say
that
so.
the house itself haunted.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So I think the legends surrounding it are kind of sensationalized, but
Mm-hmm.
it does have a lot of history. I think that there is something going on there. Um, and yeah,
That was fun.
that was fun.
Sorry it was so long.
It was worth it. It was worth it with the ice skating and the punching. It was all good.
But I'm sure next week's episode is going to be just as fun. We are going to be going to another super exciting state, Iowa.
Iowa. I'm excited about next week as well. Do you have a sage moment that you want to?
I do, but now I feel weird using a joke because I feel like we've laughed so much during this episode.
This is just a jovial episode.
It's
It's
a
needed.
bunch of laughter, best medicine.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the longest week of my whole life. So
We don't say that every week. We just say it every week. Please ignore it.
I mean, every week is a new week to be the longest of my life.
I do have a sage moment though.
Perfect.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
What is an egg's favorite car?
It has to do with a shell. I just know it. But I don't know.
A Volkswagen.
So nothing to do with a shell.
Well, Joe finished my joke off with it's an old beater of a car. Really just the shell.
What a good addition. You should write jokes.
That's it.
My sage moment is not a joke or even a fun fact, honestly, because it has been the longest week in history. I haven't been doing anything except for watching Love Island UK season 3. It's been my binge watch. I've loved it. I have learned a lot of new British slang.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been Snapchatting Jennifer all about it. And my favorite one is when they say like they're getting on with someone, or like somebody is like their cup of tea, they say that they've got crack or they're cracking on. And I just think that's the funniest thing ever. And I want to use it in every day. But I don't think that I can pull it off. So
No, especially not in Florida. People are going to think that you're talking about cocaine.
right, actual crack. So I think I'll stay away from it, but I have been loving Love Island UK. And so shout out to Marley and Kelly who told me to go ahead and watch it. All right. Well, that is it for this week. We want to hear all about your ghost misadventures, what you would like us to cover next, any ghost tours that we need to go on, all of it, none of it, everything in between. Email hauntedorhoaxpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, Haunted or Hoax Pod, the Twitter @H or H Pod, and Facebook @Haunted or Hoax.
Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, or at least leave a review so you can be entered for a chance to win that awesome Sage Moment candle from the Scaredy Cat Candle Company that they made for us. Be sure and send us a screenshot of that review, though, so we know how to get in touch with you if you win.
Oh, I was just going to say, we didn't mention that last week. So be sure to do that. I didn't really think through how we were going to announce the winner. So
it's fine. But if you just want to send us a screenshot, either DM us or send it to our Gmail, whatever you want to do, that you left a review. It does not have to be a 5-star review. It just has to be an honest review. We would really appreciate that. And we will be announcing the winner March 1st.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
That's it.
That was
That's everything.
that was everything from demons to
Dancing.
dancing on skates. So
From demons to derbies.
there we go. And I guess we'll just talk to you guys next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.